This bespoke tent is handmade in Japan by a minimalist Japanese brand using a new space-age material which is half the weight of traditional materials but 15 times stronger than steel at a molecular level. Locus Gear's attention to detail is so intense that they currently have a 3-month wait list for these shelters. Why would anyone wait that long for a waterproof tarp? And what is this crinkly material that it's made from? And how is it made when there aren't even any stitches? Welcome back to Arrow Hiking. In today's episode we're going to look at Locus Gear and how they're using this weird translucent material called Dyneema to make tents which are half the weight of a traditional tent, but they come at an expensive catch. We're going to deep dive into Dyneema, or Cuban fibre as it was previously called, and look at how tent manufacturers are using this material that was accidentally invented to engineer some of the lightest, strongest, and philosophy-driven tents in the world. Now, since the early 20th century, the gold standard for tent fabric was this: ripstop nylon. It had just replaced oil-waxed cotton canvas because it was lightweight, cheaper to produce, and is very compressible. Now, the fabric itself is not actually waterproof. What makes it waterproof is the silicone coated on either one or both sides. Now, the trouble with this material is that once water gets absorbed into the core's strand, it's going to get heavy and it's going to stretch. This means that the tent structure is going to lose its integrity because it's going to not be as taut, but it also means that when you're packing it away and setting it up in the next morning, it's going to still be just completely wet and you're not going to have a very fun time. Dyneema Composite Fabric is a completely different material to its woven predecessor. Instead of a woven fabric, like the shirt you're probably wearing, it's a laminate. So this means, like the laminator you would have used in school or in the office, this material is comprised of ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, which is going to be these grass blades here. We're going to use this as an example. And it's laminated horizontally and vertically between two layers of polyester films, just like this. And then they're laminated together, and this is Dyneema. This is how it's made. Ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene threads, which is those grass threads we just talked about, has many names. Originally, it was called Cuban fibre. We'll get into that in a second. But it's now called Dyneema, or DCF, Dyneema Composite Fabrics. Now, Dyneema is actually a portmanteau, which means it's a combination of two words. In this case, they're two ancient Greek words. Now, I looked it up, and dynamis is the first word. It means power or force. And the second word is nema, meaning thread or yarn. So Dyneema literally means power thread or force yarn, depending on which way you want to go. These strands were actually invented by accident in 1968 by Dr. Pennings. He was originally trying to separate different lengths of carbon and hydrogen while working at the Dutch health company, DSM. While he was stirring, he realized that these thin, wispy threads would form. And when he tried to pull these threads apart, he couldn't actually pull them apart by hand. That's how strong they were. So fast forward to 1992, and this guy, and I couldn't find a photo of him, engineer RJ Downs, secretly worked on a project for the America's Cup yacht race. It was these two legends which realized that you could sandwich the fiber between two films of mylar. Now, the result was a material and a sail that was 40% lighter than the traditional Kevlar counterparts. Because of this, they were able to man the yacht with 4 people instead of 12. Now, obviously, they won the race, and afterwards a reporter famously coined these new sails Cuban fibre, a play to the yacht's name, America Cubed. It was not until the early 2000s when gear manufacturers and avid hikers started to see the cross-compatibility of this material. Ryan Jordan with Backpacking Light and Mountain Laurel Designs were some of the first US companies to use this material. And later, Hyperlight Mountain Gear and Z-Packs built their entire company around using the laminate version for their tents and the weaved versions for their backpacks. While these American brands were making waves overseas, in 2009 in Japan, Jotaro Yoshida had already been heavily influenced by the ultralight mindset and making his own gear. He created Locus Gear as a way to combine these skills with Dyneema to really put his artisan philosophies to test. Now, there's a Japanese term called Kodawari, and it's defined as an uncompromising and relentless obsession to one's craft or life work. Now, if you've ever been to Japan, or if you've ever seen some of these crafts up close, you know what I'm talking about. There's a culture in Japan where, as an artisan, you dedicate your life to absolute perfection of this craft. Now, fast forward 17 years, and this is Yoshida or Locus Gear's Kodawari. This is their perfection, the Locus Gear Hapi. This is a shelter that strips back everything that is not absolutely necessary. Even if we're just looking at the shape, the pyramid is one of the most structurally sound shapes that also combines weight and livability. Even the name Hapi has a reference back to pyramids. Hapi is considered the father of gods in Egyptian mythology. He was a caring god who was quite harmonious and cared a lot about the balance of systems. And you can see that balance really translate into the design of this shelter. So Locus Gear's two other pyramid tents are also named after Egyptian mythology and history. We have the Locus Gear Khufu, he was known actually for building the pyramid Khufu, and he is still mummified and buried there. And then we have the largest tent, the Khafra. Now Khafra is a king, and he was known for building the Khafra pyramid as well as the Sphinx. So you can really see that their design is taken a lot of inspiration from history and really building that into their design features. Let's look at the corners of this tent as an example of attention to detail. These corners are cut greater than 90 degrees. They come out to the center and then they cut back in. So what this is going to allow is when you pull it out, you're going to get a bit more floor space. Now, you're also going to be able to pull on these pegs really tight, and this is going to create a drum-type pitch that's going to really withhold against storms and lots of rain. Here is my absolute favorite part of this tent. All of these seams here that you can see, they are not stitched and cut and stuck together. They are heat bonded. This creates an incredible look to the tent that is one cursive sheet rather than many panels stitched together. It's also stronger and also has a longer life than stitching and taping. Now, to show you just how far Yoshida pushes Locus Gear and his idea of Kodawari is to look at the now discontinued tent called the Jedi. The Jedi event was a shelter that was still made of Dyneema, but instead of the polyester or mylar film sticking it together, they used event. Event is essentially the same as Gore-Tex. So, you had a shelter designed for the high mountains that breathed just like your waterproof membrane jacket. So why all this bother to use a shelter that should basically be on display at an art gallery? Well, we already covered the two main reasons to use DCF, the weight savings and the non-stretch properties. This tent weighs 350 grams, which is about half the weight of its Silnylon counterpart. But it also costs twice as much. This shelter costs 91,000 yen, which is quite ridiculous if you're just looking at price alone. But what has Locus Gear achieved with the Hapi? Well, this is a minimalist masterpiece, and it does solve many problems that other pyramid shelters have, such as having the door on the long side, which allows two people to come in on either side without having this trekking pole in the way. The DCF plays with the light on the outside. We can see the rain, we can see all the shapes of trees, all from inside the tent. It really does allow quite an immersive experience while you're out hiking. It's a strange contradiction, almost like an oxymoron, to be so safe by such a thin and translucent material. Locus Gear furthers this weightless concept by removing everything that is not absolutely necessary. We already know that the seams are heat bonded, so there's no need for stitching. But the entrance to the tent is a YKK AquaGuard No. 3 zipper, which removes the need for a flap to keep water out. Now, the center pole is actually your trekking pole. This doubles the use of your materials so that you don't need to carry an extra pole while hiking, which further saves weight. Now, all these features are not explicitly unique to Locus Gear, but what's interesting about this company is their attention to detail. Everything just works so harmoniously and so symbiotically together, kind of like the happy god I mentioned earlier. Everything just works well. The Kodawari here is really the difference. You have to experience it to really feel what this shelter is about. Now, all of this comes back to the ultralight mantra of you pay more for less. Do you think that's actually the case here with the Locus Gear Hapi DCF, or do you think that the intense craftsmanship justifies the price? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.